Hey everybody, before we start I want to talk a bit about myself and this game briefly. You all know I hate this crap, but I should also state that yes, this channel is very opinionated and biased because I mostly think from my personal perspective. Everyone is going to have their personal viewpoints, and I think the closest thing you might find to a more fair review of this game is with Foxcade. I don't necessarily agree with him on every single detail, but it's still a damn good set of videos that deserves your attention for a calmer look on this game. And if you want more detailed researched history as to why the hell this game was made in the first place, you can also check out the video by Matt McMuscles on his show What Happened for better details regarding why the game was made. I will be leaving links to both videos in the description and comment section. I was also previously going to cover the comic book of DmC. Basically, it was set before the game that was going to help fill in details. But here's the thing, there's a lot of contradictions to the point where I just think it's non-canon. It can't really work that well within the game. At best, I might make some mentions of it, if only to get some kind of payoff from the comic, but the main reason I didn't really review it, aside from it just not really working out, is it's hard to make it funny. And I was stressing out over it so much, it was literally killing me, so I just decided not to cover it because at the end of the day, it's just Virgil being a freaking moron and not planning things out properly. And really, I don't need to yell about half an hour for that. Oh, and one more thing that suddenly came up while I was editing this video. You might notice a drop in quality in the footage, and that's because apparently, well, some of my footage got corrupted. It pretty much expanded right after you beat Virgil in the final battle to the first half of the Virgil DLC. I don't know why it did this, I don't know why this is the only footage affected by this, but as you can see, this is unusable, so I had to borrow some footage from some people. That would be my luck, or maybe this is a sign that Virgil really hates me. The feeling's mutual, buddy. And so, here we are, reviewing DmC at last. I am so thankful the old Devil May Cry series is back, you have no frigging idea. But for this video, I'm not going to be mentioning elements from Devil May Cry 5. Mainly because I need to actually see all of Devil May Cry 5 beyond just the ending. For those who have stuck with any of my reviews, even back when I used to do text instead of video, you all know I hate the DmC reboot. Back then, it was one of the games I hated the most, even blinding me in a few cases. I wasn't the only one, and while there were some who did have genuine reasons for not liking it, arguments always turned into, oh, you just don't like that Dante's hair is black instead of white. I can name a few people like Screw Attack, Jim Sterling, and other news sites that tend to run with it so much that it's become a poor joke. Not to say certain fans were innocent with some dumb stuff, absurdly dumb stuff, and sadly more stuff. I just want to be done with this drama. And honestly, because of shit like this, it was hard to blame those sites and people for doing such things, since it was one of the easiest buttons to press. If you like the DmC reboot, that's perfectly fine. This video is not meant to shame you or anything like that. That being said, I'm still going to express my thoughts because I just want to get this over with. It's been so long, I just want to get this video out. And not helping with the drama was Tamim himself constantly throwing shade at the series, showing how he didn't understand it, and even saying how parts of the old series were dumb. Let's cover one of the most well-known quotes. Tamim once said old Dante was boring and lame. What was cool then isn't cool now. Yeah, because a character who acts boring and an asshole is clearly better. Anger aside, he does actually make a good point, even if he did it the wrong way. Many shows, comics, and other forms of media often receive drastic changes to their lineup, like Marvel's Ultimate Universe, which had origins, powers, and even characters changed around. Or you can look at how many different Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shows exist. I think I lost count at some point. Are there more? The change itself is not god-awful, it's how you approach the change and how you handle those ideas. For example, I find myself more easily drawn to the Marvel Cinematic Universe rather than the original comics because I don't have to worry too much about reading the past 100 issues or a sudden retcon they are going to throw into a character that ruins them. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that would happen with any of the movies, but it's much easier for me to get into the characters and enjoy their interactions in a way some comics just aren't able to do so. Is everything perfect? Not really, but there's enough there to capture my interest. At least the MCU Spider-Man didn't make a frickin' deal with the devil.
Unfortunately, much like many elements of the game, and the whole controversy and all that jazz, Tamim really handled the reactions to his Dante very poorly. Really, that's the short version of the controversy. When the game first debuted, it received a lot of hate for changing things. I remember being very irked at seeing the first trailer, but friends helped me calm down to at least see another trailer. And then I started getting pissed off thanks to certain scenes. But I started to have hope as the game was about to be released. While doing some research before watching the story on YouTube, since obviously I wasn't going to pay $60 for a game I was, well, most likely going to hate anyway, I learned how the game was going to tackle certain themes, have a deeper story, so I was a bit more optimistic and cheerful diving into a playthrough of the reboot. Maybe it would actually be good. Maybe I would finally eat my words. Maybe. Just maybe. This would not be as bad.
You can't kill me. I'm 1,200 years old.
You don't look a day over 12,000.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
So, to quote my friend Lewis,
I don't know what I expected, really.
Here's the thing, Ninja Theory just had to make the story good. Well, okay, there was obviously more to it than that, but I'm mostly focusing on what I wanted. There was no way in hell I was going to see the original Dante in this game. I was going to have to accept what was new and mentally prepare myself again for this review, especially after learning Capcom were the ones to say, make the rebooted DmC different from the original. And don't get me wrong, I don't think all of the hate should be levied on Ninja Theory. Lord knows Capcom has been unable to admit its own mistakes and constantly ruin themselves. Asura's Wrath ending as DLC and Breath of Fire being a mobile game are but a few examples. Hell, I recently found out thanks to a video by Stop Skeletons from Fighting that they have been tripping over themselves a ton when it comes to translations and the like. Shenlong, anyone? However, just because you are limited in not making a clone of the characters doesn't mean you can't produce something good. Defenders of this game kept on saying how shit the old series was anyway, that it needed to be changed. Tamim admitted it as well. Hell, I mentioned how other forms of media needed to change, especially if certain things have become unacceptable in this day and age. The Mandarin and Black Panther are two examples of how much things have changed when comparing them to their very first appearance. Or if there are ways to improve the character and how they can operate more effectively. Let me put it this way, I love the changes made to the Spider-Man PS4 game because Peter is utilizing gadgets now. Why? Because he's a damn smart scientist and has been known to do this kind of thing, and I feel that's been neglected a lot. Or just used in one episode or comic and then just thrown away for all eternity. If he is that smart, of course I expect a huge change like that so he can adapt to a line of villains that are growing more and more dangerous. Plus, he isn't stuck in high school like almost every other iteration of Parker. And there are many more examples I can list of positive changes in media. There was times I was even wrong about ideas I originally hated. Taking Spider-Man as an example again, I thought the storyline of Doc Ock taking over his body would be horrible. In reality, that move gave me a Spider-Man with gadgets that I always wanted, albeit with a villainous personality. But even then, it provided a renewed interest in a villain that wasn't even really high on my list. Or how about Rocket Raccoon? I had the same reaction as Angry Joe when the Furball was added into Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now, thanks to the movies and some of the comic books, Rocket is perhaps one of my favorite characters in the entirety of the MCU. But here's the thing to remember. Not all changes are going to work in this reboot. Oh boy, it failed hard. I looked at it multiple times just to give this thing the best possible chance it was ever going to get from me. I have listened to almost every damn argument I can find on YouTube, and no, this wasn't done recently. I have been doing this since the channel first started, just so I could properly understand things, and I only ended up finding more problems. And not a single argument can properly convey to me why this story is good, due to every contradiction with these characters who are at best tolerable, and that's about one character from the entire cast, while the rest I want to hurl off a cliff. I didn't even have to compare these characters to their original counterparts to understand why they are so bad. Now, I hear some say, why even cover this now? Much like with my review on the other DmC games, I'm a few years late to the scoring thousands of views party. Here's the thing, it's still a bad story on its own, and worth covering based on that merit. Not to mention, I want to see how far I have come from the backseat review of the game I did a long time ago. That I'm not exactly proud of, by the way. And finally, I just need to make peace with this game once and for all, especially when a friend bought it for me just so I could review it. Although come to think of it, I still need to play those Uncharted games.
If there's another thing I want you to learn from this video, cherish free time when you have it, especially before you get into the workforce. At any rate, let's dive into the Devil May Cry reboot.
But first, a few things about the gameplay, which actually include things I like. Shocking, I know, but I have to admit that and have no problem doing so, even if it isn't that much. I like the fact that Dante stumbles a bit with his last combo, showing a bit of his amateurish nature. And I do like how Limbo moves about, even feeling a bit trippy in some cases. Some of the added difficulties are also cool too, and the Definitive Edition thankfully removes a cringy scene or two. Granted, that doesn't help everything, but seeing Virgil without that dumb hat is a major plus. The controls are a tad iffy, and a bit hard for me to get used to after adjusting and relearning the original DmC series. But not god-awful, and I think I was able to get about as good as I was going to get without too much practice. And it honestly plays better than a lot of other action games I have reviewed, like Dante's Inferno. If this game had released after the god-awful experience of Game 2, I might have actually warmed up to it a hell of a lot more than I would now after experiencing Game 3 and 4, and there are reasons for that. The AI, though, can be downright dumb. There were a few hilarious moments where they didn't move at all thanks to my guns. Now, I know you expect me to just pull out the whole knock the enemy into the air thing and shoot them with little consequences, but to be fair, a few enemies in the original series could have that done to them. No, it's a real problem when they are on the ground and don't do anything about it. Look, I'm barely even hitting the other one, and they will not move to preserve their life. That's not just embarrassing for a DmC game, and yet, that's how the game got me to laugh my ass off.
Okay, you see shit like that? That's why I'm not destroying the comic or the game. Unintentional as this shit is, it made me laugh. And trust me, I'm valuing that stuff a hell of a lot more these days.
Sadly, I can't say the same about boss fights. And really, what else can I say beyond, well, they're frickin' lame, they're big, they're dumb, and don't really pose a challenge unless I rush in like an idiot to get hit. And by then, I am just tired and don't want to play anymore. Looking at you, Nightclub level. Enemy grunts provide more of a challenge, particularly the enemy called Dream Runners. Story-wise, it's disappointing that they are just rendered as super enemies when the Red Masked Demon known as Dracovic felt like a rival character. But they did kick my ass for a good while, at least until I learned their patterns, that and not falling asleep from being bored. No joke, I actually nearly dozed off a few times since the game was so easy until this point. The camera is an improvement. While it is great to see things a tad better, the visual style is hit and miss. Sometimes I can see just fine and even praise the unique style. Other times I want to eject the disc to prevent me from playing, the worst of it being the Nightclub because I hate frickin' bright neon colors. This was just obnoxious. If the game looked more like, say, these levels, the one in which we enter Dante's soul, I guess? Dreamscape? Either way, this brings out the best in DmC style, with evenly bright colors and appealing atmosphere. I would have loved for the game to show off more colors instead of them blending in together to create stuff so dark and unappealing. Color-coded enemies are also stupid. Yes, I know they are better here than in the original game, because they can actually take damage from other weapons, but that's still no excuse for the lazy and poor design. Same goes for the results at the end of missions, as they rely on these souls you have to collect. The souls are not really worth it and give so few red orbs, I wonder why even bother including them in the first place. While there are incentives to replaying stages, story elements can also bog them down and make them a chore to play. And yes, even DmC is not immune to mandatory walking sections every now and then, slowing the game down needlessly. You can't even skip these or run super fast either. And I think you guys heard enough of my complaints regarding the gameplay. Overall, it's close to being a genuinely good Devil May Cry game, but not quite enough thanks to the many bad elements I mentioned. It's frustrating for the wrong reasons, even with the updates. I honestly prefer Game 1 over this, though at the very least, it's better than Game 2. At least there's one decent boss fight.
But now let's cover the actual real reason I never want to play this game again. The story. And already I feel like I need a drink.
The story feels like a melding of Game 1 and 3, given how they are centered around Mundus and Virgil being threats to Dante. Though for Virgil, not until the very end of the game. In this world, Sparta was part of Mundus' army, fell in love with an angel, and fled away from Mundus as he took over the world through corporations and making everyone in debt to him, trying to create a degree of control. We can see this when the other world, known as Limbo, shows words to represent what the products are and what they really mean. If this at all sounds familiar, it really should, because John Carpenter's They Live did the exact same thing, just replacing demons with aliens. As for Sparta's legacy, that has been erased, meaning any chance of seeing the original characters is pretty much dead with it. Why? Because that very legacy was central to the original personalities of the Sparta twins, as I explained in my review of the third game. It's not necessarily a bad idea and is good for helping these characters stand on their own. Unfortunately, the game doesn't do much with it. With their mother dead thanks to an attack by Mundus, Sparta sealed the memories of his children and separated them. With Dante going into an orphanage, presumably anyway, considering, well, the comic kinda has some contradictions, but let's just say an orphanage for now, and Virgil being left with a rich family. Some have said this idea was dumb, but it's one of the few I actually think is good. Why? Given how strong these kids are as Dante easily lifts his mom in one flashback, there was a chance they might have wanted to get vengeance right out of the gate. By sealing off their memories at such a young age, they would be able to live a life as normal as possible and not rush off to their deaths. The problem I have with it though is how quickly it is all undone and leaves no significant impact. Dante just blindly follows Virgil around with little emotion. Get used to that. It's a running thing unless Cat is involved. Not to mention, well, Dante didn't exactly have a life of peace either. Hell, if the comic is correct, he was left in an orphanage filled with demons. Another major problem in the plot are the angels, or rather the lack of them. We clearly see some around Dante, then suddenly strippers who are dressed as angels, and I'm praying to God they aren't angels because that is a complete waste. All we get are the angel arms and maybe seeing a few in flashbacks. Even a throwaway line would have worked because as it stands, I don't get the advantage of angel and demon hybrids beyond their devil trigger. At that point, just make him half human instead of making a giant hole in the plot. There's no need to not properly use the term Nephilim. And before you bring up Darksiders, they fucked it up there too. They do at least try to offer a good demon, or at least a neutral one with my favorite character in the game, Phineas. He's the one character who offers more detail about the lore and even helps Dante receive the devil trigger. One could argue that he does give Dante more development, showing that there were demons who didn't want to just kill Dante, and showing Dante wasn't always trigger happy. Unfortunately, that's the extent the idea is stretched out since all other demons have no real personality and Phineas offers little else. One of the only thing I feel holds any substance to the game is trying to identify Dante and Virgil by their weapons. But I already explored that in Devil May Cry 3, and it does nothing to help me like either of these reboot characters. First, let's look at the main man himself, Dante. Given some footage I've shown earlier, it's very easy to label him as just an asshole. And he kinda is, barring the development he has to undergo. There are similarities between this one and its Game 3 counterpart in how they are jerks, but the difference is pretty clear when you compare the two. When regular Dante was taunting people, and for the record, this reboot, it doesn't have a taunt button, it was usually towards talented foes and to purposely antagonize them to get a good fight out of them, since a good fight was all he cared about. At least until development happened, but even then he still loved a good fight. Compare that to reboot Dante, who was aggressive, mainly to be aggressive, like knocking away a guy's drink or knocking out the nightclub bouncer. And I'm starting to think this may have an explanation regarding Tamim's tastes. Or at the very least, maybe what he used to think, since it has been a few years and I'm willing to believe his taste may have changed. In my review of Enslaved, I left out something, and this time it's a quote from Alex Garland, the guy who apparently looked over the story of the reboot. Originally, Monkey was written to be far more of an asshole, kicking down a guy who needed some help. Combine that with Tamim's quote earlier about what was cool then wasn't cool now, and the opening of the game that is trying way too hard to make the reboot Dante seem so cool, I think it's pretty obvious what Tamim's tastes were at the time. Not helped with a certain scene added to the definitive edition that I'll address later. If this Dante does make me laugh or interested, it's usually accidental, like this one scene after finding out Mundus has a kid and him expressing interest in taking down the big bad.
And if you do kill Mundus, who would take his place?
I never noticed this before, and my god, it is hilarious. Now, since DmC 3 Dante was also a jerk, one could argue that it should work here. Except not quite. There are a few factors to consider here. For starters, the supporting cast is weak, unable to really bring out a whole lot of emotions out of the guy. As a result, this brings about the other problem. He's boring. A good supporting cast is able to bring out more emotion from such characters, as is a good actor, and sadly this game lacks both. His reactions are also questionable at times too. Sure, there is obvious concern over Kat during her beatdown, and the shock at the, baby shooting. Yeah, another topic I am saving for later. But then there's a moment when they defeat Mundus, and the resulting battle leaves a lot of destruction. Quite frankly, too much of it. I won't blame him for this mess since given what Mundus is capable of, but his reaction is another matter entirely. Superman from Man of Steel is looking at this so-called safe city and saying,
"Oh well, boys, you win some, you lose some, am I right?" What, I'm based off the Zack Snyder Superman. I'm not exactly the most heroic figure, as he so eloquently put it. Yeah, I'm still bitter, what of it?
A good balance to a boring character or someone we have seen before is usually how they move, how they handle the situation. Nero, for example, is already kind of a trope. well, with needing to save his girlfriend, being an angsty teen, and having anger issues. But at least his gameplay helped make them fun to see and play as, and you already know my feelings on the gameplay here. Now one could argue, well, we could still make his development interesting, except my entire argument right now is how he isn't interesting. One of his absolute worst scenes has to be when confronting Mundus for the first time. Now in a meetup with the main villain, at this time in the game, their actual first meeting. This is the ideal situation to show the pinnacle of the character's development. Original Dante is able to show Virgil just how much he has changed from the beginning of the game, and the climactic duel they shared at the end of Game 3 as one example. So naturally, we get none of that. In fact, the meeting starts with Mundus asking why Dante killed his kid, which, wow, that's actually kind of a mood killer, especially given how confident he was earlier. Dante doesn't help with this during the conversation, as he fumbles about purely trying to distract Mundus, which if you think about the original Dante in his shoes, it would probably go more like this.
What are you doing?
Dance off, bro. Me and you.
All it demonstrates is how clueless Dante feels in this situation, unable to properly explain the importance of humanity. Instead of showing how big his heart has become, he shows how small it is by mocking Mundus and the dead child. No, really, listen.
I gotta tell you, killing your child like that, watching it explode into little wet chunks, hearing you scream like one of you little demon bitches, priceless.
Now I know that he was just distracting the guy and was even against killing Lilith when the trade was going down, plus Mundus is technically one of the last guys who deserves any sympathy. The issue I have here is that there are hundreds of better ways to handle this scene. He does technically change throughout the story, such as arguing with Virgil regarding not just saving Kat, but after what went down with Lilith. Hell, you can see him taking gunshots for Kat as he tries to carry her to safety. Granted, that so-called argument was very weak and added into the definitive edition and not in the original, but at this rate, I'm willing to throw a gold star at almost anything positive. The final battle with Virgil also kinda demonstrates how he wants to be a hero to everyone, saying how he will protect the world since he doesn't want humanity enslaved by anyone. Naturally learning this through Kat, of course, because that's basically her purpose in the game, and he nearly kills his brother during their duel. Still, he's not exactly doing a bang-up job as people are being eaten by demons, while they previously just stood around and did nothing. In fact, in this scene, where the hell did Kat come from? Not once did she appear inside Mundus' headquarters, not even in limbo form. Did they seriously try, pick her up, and then suddenly go back into this roof or something? Or is she secretly Spider-Woman? Okay, my distractions aside, at least he isn't a psychopath, clearly showing some concern when Barbas revealed Kat and Virgil were being attacked. The definitive edition does add one more scene actually, making him walk with Kat and comfort his love interest in her time of need, given the bombshell Virgil dropped and...
Okay, I'm not gonna pretend that when losing emotions they can run wild, especially when you lose someone, and that you might need some kind of connection. Especially sex.
Something like, say, the sex scene in Rise of Arsenal with Red Arrow and Cheshire almost worked, since they were taking their anger out on each other over the loss of their daughter, and both don't really know how to process handling it. It's why you see some assholes in comedies hit on women in funerals, and I wouldn't doubt that, yeah, you might want to dive into sex to get rid of those feelings, to feel something other than heartbreak. This is the one moment that if they followed up in the sequel, I can see Dante and Kat doing the deed, purely to try and move on from Virgil's bullshit, or even in a genuine relationship. Also, the Red Hour and Cheshire thing, that was later ruined by an impotence joke, and Roy Harper acting like an ass about it. However, this Dante puts his hand on a grieving woman's ass when her entire life just fell apart in front of her, that one of the few people she trusts more than anyone else just stabbed her in the back and would treat her like shit. Your solution? Let me pat that ass. She didn't know prompting whatsoever to warn such a thing. And yes, I can see her smacking Dante's waist or something. That doesn't exactly make it better. This was a scene added into the definitive edition for no real reason. If they actually expand on their relationship, show us more scenes of them acting in such a way, I honestly would have ignored this, or maybe even form a defense. Instead, I'm just left tilting my head. And this is where I can finally mention the infamous wig joke. See, there are defenders of it, saying how this can show foreshadowing since this Dante receives white hair later in the game, or how it demonstrates growth for his character and how he has to earn it. There are a few problems with this. The first was the context and timing of this reveal, not helped with journalists labeling this cutscene as a response to fan complaints, and as far as I'm aware, nobody at Ninja Theory or Capcom were bothered to protect themselves from this, so it just makes them look worse by not saying anything. Second, this kind of joke is often used in shows and movies to point out how ridiculous things are in previous installments or something. The Luke Cage show made fun of the old outfit, X-Men Apocalypse pointed out how the third thing sucks and barely hiding the hatred for X-Men 3 The Last Stand, the RoboCop reboot rejecting the old design, etc. The problem? A lot of these jokes aren't funny to begin with and usually done in poor taste, and they just look worse if your story or game doesn't hold up, which is what happened with Apocalypse and the RoboCop reboot. Hell, in Apocalypse it felt misplaced and served no real purpose. At least with RoboCop that kinda makes sense because, well, the original was very slow. Of course you would want an upgrade. Third, Dante has no reaction to having this new hair permanently. Where is the mirror here so he can see it? He doesn't even say anything during his devil trigger either. If you are going to use foreshadowing, at least have the character react to the thing he previously hated. And last but not least, he hasn't matured. This ending right here kinda ruins his development a bit, because he grabs Kat's ass after what has to be a fairly traumatic experience for her. There's a difference between a kiss, which could be interpreted in a few different ways, especially given how they both lose someone, versus an ass grab, which usually means, and I'm going to say this so you can remember the damn point of this rant, Sugide Suri, I'm coming for that booty.
Also, maybe you shouldn't do this like 3 to 5 minutes after, oh, I don't know what major event just went down. Oh right, nearly killing your goddamn brother.
But could this character be fixed by a sequel? You know, a sequel is still coming out. I certainly want to believe so. It would still depend on the people involved that are shaping Dante's attitude. The problem is that I'm judging the character as he is now, and it's not good. And he wouldn't be so grating if his supporting cast wasn't so bad to help counter some of these behaviors. And before someone comments that I hate this Dante just because he's an asshole, there are a ton of characters I have praised that went through the whole asshole turned into good guy trope. I mentioned the spoiled prince known as Luc von Fabre several times in the past from Tales of the Abyss. Trust me, I wanted to hurl this asshole off a goddamn volcano the more I dealt with him, but his supporting cast brought out the best in the character eventually, gave good reasons for his behavior, and even had him dealing with some really heavy stuff, like killing for the first time, or even dealing with the knowledge that he helped destroy an entire village, watching as a child ended up dying before his eyes. Or how about Haseo, a character I recently went over. Well, as recently as, putting the video up, you know what I mean. Showing how he has a good supporting cast since they weren't always afraid to stand up to him. Even a jerkwad like him proved he had a good heart on occasion, and was only so intensely angry because he wanted to save his friend. Neither character needed only the love interest to change them for the better, is what I'm trying to say here. Next is Mundus, the main villain who honestly should have been easy to get right. The original was your typical demon lord, who while lacked much personality, was still a great threat and a memorable boss fight. Even if I managed to cheese it for the sake of time and no penalties now that I have a few more brain cells. And to be fair, I kinda like some elements of what this Mundus has, as I mold them over my head. Like, what if Mundus wasn't the strongest demon? Like if he bonded himself to Limbo purely so he could live and get an edge over the competition. I can kinda see that given how he doesn't usually get his hands dirty unless he is super pissed off, and he supposedly drained himself after that large attack on the city. Unfortunately, the game refuses to entertain any of these ideas. Instead, what we get is a pretty boring foe, and he lacks an intimidating factor. Not helped with some of the dialogue he has, some of which is painful. In fact, there's a huge shift from him wanting Dante to come to him, eagerly awaiting him so he could get his vengeance, only to switch gears, presumably rethinking, oh right, my child is dead. I'm depressed again. However, there is one thing I will defend about him. His boss form. Many really hated this transformation, and it's hard not to see why when compared to the original. But I think it's fitting considering the kind of demon he is. This is a being all about control, wanting to stay in control and run his entire city. As far as he's concerned, he is the city. So him turning into a giant golem using the city itself, well, it's actually kind of fitting. Do I think this form could have a way cooler design? Oh hell yes! But what I'm trying to say is that I get what they wanted to do with him. And I hope you like the dose of positivity there, because everything else about this battle with him is just the absolute worst. Why? Because he is so damn easy. His attacks are super easy to dodge, some of which I'm not even sure how I dodged, and he takes quite a large amount of damage. The only time I was hurt was when he used the Make Floor Lava move, a technique commonly used by the succubus. Hell, it feels like someone copy and pasted a few elements in there, which just makes this fight lazier. How in the hell did I get from Barbas, pretty much the best boss fight in the game due to needing to dodge and have good timing, to just pathetic? This is Devil May Cry 2 quality of bad boss designs, because at least some of those bosses could actually hit me. As much as I hate to admit it, even the Savior boss battle from DmC 4, arguably one of the most tedious boss fights in the entire series, manages to surpass Mundus with utmost ease because at least that guy could actually hit me. At least I felt like I was in danger there. Mundus worked in the original due to having those personal elements worked into the plot. This wasn't just some mad demon that took away Dante's mother. He created a demon in the shape of Dante's mom to manipulate and use him, and even corrupted Virgil into Nilo Angelo. These are significant events that clearly affect Dante and give him a reaction to more than just a blank stare. And keep in mind that I still think that Mundus falls into the generic super demon lord category. This should not have been that hard to make a better character. I mean, technically this Mundus does a lot of things similar to the old one concerning what happened to the parents of Dante and Virgil, but it never felt important enough since neither brings their parents up that much. Or if Ava is brought up, she's too busy being called a whore. Barbas at least provides something interesting given how he produced an angel arm. And given his color scheme, what if he wasn't a demon? What if he was an actual angel as well, making him an angel that serves Mundus? Some interesting details could be made. In fact, you could have had fallen angels barely able to retain grasp on their power and give Dante that extra bit of challenge. Not to mention, Barbas actually had a genius plan of broadcasting Dante killing demons, but they would be disguised as humans, further gathering the human support on the side of Mundus. And I was actually getting excited if these elements got mixed together to create more interesting scenarios, and
I think you can guess how well that turned out based on my expression.
so yeah, plot potential isn't just wasted on Dante either. Everyone has this problem. I can't even talk about the other villains that much because they are just not that interesting. The Succubus, whose real name I found out was Poison, was a waste and just meme material to show how immature Dante was. And Lilith only showed a possible victim, just seeking Mundus' aid for her own protection/power trip as she didn't want the baby to die to save her own life. But that did little to warrant any sympathy or understanding for the character. Her dying so fast might have helped with that. Even Barbas is cast off to the side with little fanfare. Combined with what I said about Mundus earlier, and you have an underwhelming main villain who never really feels like he's in control or a threat. And did I mention the horrible dialogue?
Me, a god, versus you, a piece of shit.
And thus this brings me to the theme of the game, or at least what I think the game wants me to think about, how society has been manipulated by demons, and we should rise up. Like I said before, it's basically a rip-off of the movie They Live, which I saw a few years ago while preparing for this review and really enjoyed. See, the thing about that movie though was that the heroes were human, hopelessly outclassed and even fighting people in the world who were manipulated by the aliens, ones who didn't want to open their eyes. Even our main heroes ended up duking it for a hell of a time. Also, Rowdy Roddy Piper and Keith David was something I never thought I needed in my life until this movie gave it to me. Not only did this film represent the determination of humanity, but also the weakness of it as well, blinded by the truth and some preferring the comforting lie. There was meaning behind what the character John Nada kept seeing with the glasses, as he was somewhat affected by those words, and he clearly cared about what was going on, enough to risk his life to help others see the truth. Or how about we make comparisons to the protagonist of Persona 5? Not quite the same as They Live, but people were still being manipulated by people higher up in the food chain. It did reach corporations, and many didn't have the strength to fight back. Things mattered to him not just because he was relatable, but he felt like a character heavily involved in the story, and not one to just give a blank stare half the time. There were still problems, of course, like the sudden tonal shift between Anne and Yusuke's stories, but at least by then I still cared about the struggles the characters went through, and at the end of the day, it did require humans needing to inspire other humans, regardless of the magic involved. Dante almost never show he cares or show other emotions, and the problem there is that anytime he tries to do stuff, he's either a jackass about it, or he will just give the same damn expression he always has. One example I can list right away is him saying,
Shit. Back in limbo. Bad day for a hangover.
but he shows no sign of a headache. Or when he talks to Virgil, hardly showing any reaction after getting his memories back, just having the same damn look he always has. Now the theme doesn't work just because Dante isn't part human or anything. I used to think that, but thanks to finding my love with Superman, who was arguably the most human out of any superhero despite being an alien, this story should have been able to find ways for Dante to care about the state of the world. That even without human DNA, that there's still a good person, who's more human than the monsters forcing us to drink some crappy energy drink. I mean, hell, that's one of the themes of the original game. Lucia? Technically, she's pure demon. I mean, at the very least, she was assembled. And the same goes for Trish as well. Except the only way he cares about what happens to the world is through the real human representation, Kat. Now, she could have played a similar role as Lady, and to an extent she does, being the reason for Dante's change, but it's done more as a love interest over her own struggles. In fact, she also serves as a damsel in distress, and you know what's coming, another Tamim quote. See, Tamim in an interview stated how he didn't like the approach of how the characters were over-sexualized. basically calling Trish a prostitute and said he could do better, like with the last female character they did, Trip from Enslaved Odyssey to the West. Apparently he wanted to create someone who you could feel was your girlfriend, or some shit like that. While I do agree that the designs of Game 4 could have been less jiggly, it's hypocritical given what is presented in this reboot. His treatment of every female character here contradicts what he says, or at least just served to make him look absolutely inept to portray a female character as anything but strong. Trip at least was a decent character in her game, and at least when she did questionable things like keeping Monkey enslaved to her, there was enough to her character that you understood why she did it, even if you don't agree with it. Granted, she still wasn't the best, as she was constantly in trouble and unable to defend herself for too long, but not a bad character, especially as what happened in the story related to her own troubles. Even that bit of moral gray where she keeps Monkey as a slave to get revenge on Pyramid for ruining her life was one of the best examples of her being interesting, showing she has some backbone and fighting her battles through her own method. Kat, though, feels more like a tool, whereas Lady and Trip are secondary protagonists. Kat has no real conflict of her own to fight, no trouble beyond what Mundus has done, and she is sadly not useful in the fight like every other Devil May Cry lady, besides Kyrie. Her skills come in the form of magic, which while useful, also could have been easily replaced with items. She does very little in the finale with Virgil and feels useless. In one moment, probably the best of Reboot Dante, he does admit that everything they did was because of Kat, that without her info, they would have been screwed. It's good for Dante because he is at least willing to admit he cannot get things done on his own and shows he valued her support. Unfortunately, this comes at the cost of Kat's character as she does nothing to defend herself. In fact, she feels like she has little self-worth since everything is always for either Dante or Virgil.
Also, putting a timestamp over here with my cramping hand because, well, we have to talk about it. Possible sexual assault. Stay classy, Tamim.
I don't mean Dante just playing grab-ass with her. I mean what she says in the game, that her stepfather attacked her every night, implying that Kat was, well, raped. Not helping was Kat being drugged up. So either rape or physical assault, either way, not very good things. No, we could just assume something else happened, and most have. Even I glanced over it the first time I saw the story until someone pointed it out to me. But here's my argument. Why not just go into more detail? The game is not afraid to show what happens to her, like her getting shot, kicked by the SWAT team while she's down, dragged away by the same team, touched by Mundus when he's being a creepy prick. You get the idea. And we know the game is capable of using multiple styles to tell its story, like with Dante's flashbacks or making use of facial expressions. So why not use the same thing for her to help clear things up? There are creative and better ways to deal with this is all I'm saying. Oh, and of course I should probably also say that a rape story like that should not be tossed to the side, since this is barely ever mentioned again within this game. Kat may not be offensively bad, depending on who you talk to anyway, but she does represent backwards thinking of Tamim. Even for as much as I ragged on Lucia, and mostly the game she comes from, she had interesting concepts, a story that actually dealt with her life, and even a final battle against a person who threatened to destroy her life, something neither Lady nor Trish got. At least not in the boss fight. My point is, with these examples of female characters, I can find quite a bit to say about each of them. Maybe less so for Trish considering what happened in Game 4, but she's at least useful in a fight. With Kat, not so much. Meanwhile, every other lady is either used as eye candy, someone for Dante to fuck like early in the game, or someone for Mundus to fuck, and the less I think about that sex space, the better. Looking at the actions and dialogue, the women of the reboot are barely treated any better than Ride to Hell Retribution, where they are all pretty much toys to have sex with, save for Kat. And keep in mind, Kat was the strongest representation of humans. I mean, you could have done more with Virgil's group, the Order, but they are faceless people who exist just to die. Kat's story is also not compelling since the main plot of the game does not care about her development at all. It's all there for the male characters to do something. The reason it worked well in Persona 5 was not only because Anne was a potential victim in the scenario, but there's heavy weight to her heart as she realizes she threw her friend under the bus, feeling guilty for not trying to stop this in the first place. She rose back against Kamoshida and awakened to a new power, getting strong emotionally as well as to stand up and fight. Kat, in the meantime? Yeah, I don't think we will ever get a battle mage out of her, and if nothing else, I find her as boring as Dante.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The character I hate the most in this game. The character I put in my top 10 worst video game characters of all time. A character that honestly makes Dante Kat's problems look minuscule by comparison. It's time to talk about Virgil.
Dear God, what did they do to you? I mean, considering what I said about Dante and the family history, changes are bound to be made by this character, especially to Virgil due to how much the original relied on that family history. And there's no better place to start than with Virgil using a gun. Boy, was this infamous. But you know what? I'm actually fine with it in this reboot. Well, after I calm down eventually. Some of you are probably thinking why the hell I'm lenient on one of the key aspects of his character, but I point to Sparta himself. Sparta here lacks a legend and was no hero. He just fled from Mundus and let him do as he pleased as far as we know. So we can assume there's no sense of honor or duty to follow in his footsteps, to believe that his way was the right way. Virgil in this continuity doesn't care about his dad that much, if at all, since he doesn't even propose or think to release him from his torment. Neither does Dante for that matter, so I guess they both kinda gave him the middle finger. So there's no sense of responsibility for upholding his legacy, only the revenge against Mundus. And considering what else this Virgil does, I have learned to accept that this guy would use just about anything and anyone to achieve his goals, especially when it's revealed he was just gonna leave Kat to die until he changed his mind due to reasons. So it is actually in character, because this version of Virgil is just an asshole and an idiot. But let's take a closer look at a certain joke. I think you guys know which one.
And I got a bigger dick.
Well, to be fair, Virgil, you are the biggest cock in this game, so technically you are actually right about this.
The reason I brought that joke up is because it's one of the only moments where Virgil feels inferior to Dante, and the only thing that justifies what Virgil thinks of him in this DLC story. And it's a pretty weak reason. See, Virgil's dying after a severe wound to the chest, and there are ghosts of sorts, I'm not sure what else you call these people, that show us what the characters think of him. What does Dante tell us about Virgil? That he feels inferior to Dante, thinking his brother always thought he was better than him, which never really manifests in the story properly to make me think Virgil saw his brother that way at all, barring the one joke I mentioned. The only other thing was a flashback of the two sparring, and Virgil being on the losing end, but Dante seemed like a good sport about it afterwards, and they were friggin' kids. So this felt frickin' pointless and an excuse for Virgil to slay Dante in his mind. But what about Kat, I hear you say? Well, Virgil also feels like Kat likes Dante more than him, which is pretty damn stupid. Some are probably going to bring up the comic where they did fall in love for contrived reasons, or the situation itself was kind of spurring emotions or something of the like. But the thing is, Virgil in that comic mind-wiped her and implanted false memories so he could focus on the job. And ignoring the comic entirely, Virgil was willing to let Kat die so he could gain an advantage against Mundus. This starts to get really damn confusing, and it's hard for me to see those actions justified. And you think his mind would have said something when realizing that, well, Kat is not a goddamn demon. Look, the illusions of his mom and Dante worked, save for the story aspect, but this is something that Virgil should immediately go and at least do a double take on, especially when some of them do bring up fair logic, like his own betrayal. He's incapable of realizing his own faults, and yet the DLC seems to kinda want us to root for the guy. Finally, there's just him hating his mom because she loved Dante more than him. I don't even know where to start with this plot point. There is nothing shown in the game that would make the player think this way. Hell, Virgil got to keep his memories, it seemed, and was raised with a good family, deciding to strike out for revenge of his own accord. Where was Dante? Oh yeah, living in poverty while demons hunted him down. That's like me saying my dad loved my brother more if he got to spend his life in juvenile hall and the ghetto where he was abused.
I'm sorry, but this makes no goddamn sense to me. Did you want a broadsword instead of a katana? Did you want to go to McDonald's instead of fucking Burger King? Did you work as a stripper with mommy issues? Tell me something. Tell me something, Virgil, that justifies this kind of bullshit.
Now, one of the only reasons I brought the DLC up was just because I needed some way to try and form Virgil's emotions so that way we can see where he's coming from. That way we can actually, try to understand him as I try to talk about this stupid-ass twist. Now, in the original Backseat review, I called this shocking and dumb, but I think I worded it wrong. Granted, I worded a lot of things wrong, and that's why I hate that stupid review. In reality, it's simultaneously surprising and predictable. Predictable since any fan of the old DmC series is going to know that Virgil will be an antagonist at some point in this reboot. The question is how. But it's surprising since Virgil does it right after Mundus and how he conducts himself. Before he starts getting angry, he actually seems surprised Dante is not on board with his plan. And that's because, much like in the comic, Virgil didn't plan ahead at all. He did not bother talking it out with everyone beforehand, trying to make them see things his way. Yet later we see he is angry and hurt that no one likes him, despite the fact that he threatened his brother, treated Kat like shit during that finale, and nearly had her killed by trying to abandon her. Do you now see why the DLC is kinda confusing? The funny thing is that now of all times is where this Virgil could demonstrate reasonable intelligence, trying to manipulate Kat and Dante through words. It's easy enough considering how both of them do what he says without a problem, unless it involves killing thousands of people. Barring the Mundus boss fight where everyone is happy despite the widespread destruction, but we'll let that slide for now. Virgil could have easily said something like this. Well, someone needs to help rebuild the world. I mean, we destroy Mundus's lair, likely destroying all the money all the countries had in debt to him, and Lord knows that's going to create its own disaster. Not to mention, in case you haven't noticed, there are demons everywhere, and we gotta stop that. And considering what we are, I doubt we should be so open about this either, since I don't want anyone to drop a nuke on us. So I propose we battle on two fronts in order to fix everything. Me and Kat will get everything squared away, try to get things back in a reasonable shape, while you do what you do best and be on cleanup duty with all these demons. It's going to be long, but I am positive we can restore a proper balance. Bitchin'. Or someone with better words can create better dialogue than that. Either way, there are many ways to handle this, but Virgil handles this crap very poorly. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Akechi, of that one scene where he's near Futaba and he tells his sad backstory. I have seen some try to argue that was him trying to show Futaba that his life was similar or something, but it kinda comes off as extra douchey considering he killed our mom. You are begging for some sympathy from the one person who will likely not give it, nor should she, though she does because, hey, poor writing. One could at least argue that the cafe is one of the few places Akechi feels safe at. And when you also consider Akechi forming a bond with the protagonist, probably one of the only social links he has, it actually becomes more understandable. Hell, his backstory is far more understandable than Virgil's. It's just a matter of how the game failed to show enough scenes to make me sympathize with him and rushed his arc. Akechi at least feels like wasted potential as opposed to being a horrible character. Then you got Virgil, where not only do we lack those scenes, but his writing feels so damn inconsistent, it actually boggles the mind as to why anyone would think we could sympathize with this character, or even understand him fully for that matter. The only thing I understand is how much of an unlikable asshole he is. At least with the original Virgil, there were little things you could read into and expand upon. I struggle to think of anything this Virgil has going for him that I could consider cool or interesting. Okay. Actually, you know what? Let me try that. I like his coat. That's about it. Alright, technically, I do think his voice actor, unlike Dante's, is actually really good, especially given the role he has to play. It's relieving to hear someone that actually tries to care about this shit story versus the master of the blank stare. Also, a bit of a fun fact, his voice actor, David D. Latour, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, played the mentor/Purple Ranger RJ in Jungle Fury. And as some people probably already know, the original Virgil's voice actor, Daniel Southworth, played Eric, aka the Quantum Ranger in Time Force.
So, coincidence at casting, or do you think they actually did this on purpose? You make the call.
That's about it for nice things though. This Virgil just doesn't work because he shows how incompetent he is when the game wants to portray him as smart, unsympathetic when he is seemingly trying to coax some kind of sympathy out of the player in the DLC, and otherwise unremarkable, especially when you compare him to the original Virgil, which I didn't even think I did that much. But you know what? Let me go over each individual detail about how dumb he is. Number 1, he recruits Dante, but fails to help to try and, disguise him from the demon cameras. The dude is a wanted man after all. In fact, the demon camera thing was an interesting idea that they just dropped, so what the hell was the point of that? 2, not giving Dante the shotgun earlier. No, really, he had no good excuse for not giving it to me. It's a shotgun, not a laser rifle. At least with the Kablooey, it was a weapon Virgil had to steal. 3, not talking to Dante about his sudden move to kill Lilith. They were lucky they were bulletproof, and the guards were also the worst shots ever, putting stormtroopers to shame. This also ended up causing Mundus to attack, and without Dante, his Virgil mobile would be destroyed and Kat dead. 4, the stupid V on his car. Why? Nah, seriously, why is there a V on it? 5, leaving Kat behind in the base of the Order. Maybe someone can find logic within the game or some kind of data log I missed or something, but they are way stronger than humans in the normal world. A bunch of armed goons isn't exactly going to be nearly enough to stop them. I really don't see the issue here, especially when I just mentioned how these guys couldn't aim to save their lives. 6. The entire comic where he expected a skeptical and frightened woman to just do as he says, rather than try and recruit and teach her first, or failing that, brainwash her, considering he can apparently wipe memories away and manipulate them. Number 7. Just expecting Dante and Kat to go along with his plans to take over the world. Dante, at the point of Kat being kidnapped, has constantly hated the plans Virgil came up with. If he thought they were just going to be an obstacle, why not just kill them stealthily or some shit? He thought he could trust them when it was clear that they didn't like the plans he had. Why would they like that one? Number 8. The rant I just made about how dumb it is because he doesn't feel loved, he turns evil. Look, I get depression. I really do. But couple that with what I just ranted about, and this character just keeps coming across as pure awful. And his complaints about not feeling loved are dumber when you realize that even though Kat and Dante hate his plans, despite everything he said to them, they still want to try and talk this out. Despite my complaints about Dante, he apologizes and keeps offering to stop the fight. Meanwhile, Virgil smiles like a madman and keeps putting his brother through hell. Sure, Dante does try to kill him later, but by that point, he was already pushed too far. It took Kat begging to help Dante get back to his senses and stop this crap. But nope, they are traitors in Virgil's mind. This is the mentality of an abuser or just a freaking madman. Then you got the crap beforehand of him feeling so hurt, despite not informing his friends of his plan. So again, why would they go along with this shit if they were feeling manipulated? Do you see why any kind of understanding or sympathy for Virgil is impossible? You got yourself into this situation, asshole. He's even giving Doubleganger for no real reason unless you count the DLC. You can argue this is meant to represent the two sides of Virgil, but his personality is so torn apart that I just can't see that. Plus his boss fight is kinda copy and pasted from Game 3 and made worse due to how slow and easy he is. And good lord, his final design in the DLC. Okay, I originally called this as Edward Cullen if he suddenly went Super Saiyan, but my friends had an even better description for it. He's basically if Vegeta existed in Dragon Ball Evolution and turned Super Saiyan. I can't unsee that anymore. But as one of the final nails to this game, as to why I just can't like it, a lot of what these characters have gone through, I have already seen done better in other games and other forms of media. Some might say, but you have to let it stand on its own. Then I realize how kind of impossible that is, at least in some cases. When you play similar games, you will sometimes ask yourself, what drives you to play game A over game B? For example, I am likely to recommend Fallout New Vegas over Fallout 3 because while they are extremely similar, I feel Vegas has better gameplay and story to it. I can still enjoy Game 3 just fine, but New Vegas is my favorite. Or maybe you like Ninja Gaiden more than Devil May Cry due to how relentless some of the enemies are, despite them both being action games with some different mechanics. Not to mention, considering what I have to do, comparisons must be drawn, or I won't be able to see what I appreciate about a character, or I won't be able to see their flaws and see what they could have done better. That's basically what I had to say to someone when they said I shouldn't be comparing some characters to Akechi, despite it being vital, so I can understand and properly explain why I did not like this character as much as everyone else. And in case you haven't noticed, I have been comparing some of these characters beyond just their originals. I don't hate them because they aren't better than the originals. On the contrary, they possess some untapped potential. I hate these characters for a wide variety of reasons. But it's also because it's some of the same tired and boring crap I have had enough of. And from people known as the masters of storytelling, I expected a hell of a lot more than this. For those hoping I would call this the absolute worst garbage I've ever played, sorry, but there are way worse games than this one. One of the goals of this channel and reviewing other titles was for me to hammer that point in, to see the worst a game can go through. But was that a success? What the flying fuck do you think? Let's take Castlevania Judgment for example, with its horrible camera, bad control scheme, and a really dumb story that I can break apart in just a few minutes, and even if I ignore the gaping plot holes, it's just not interesting. Save for the Golem, you are the only redeeming feature, my prince. Or how about Valkyria Revolution, which had the most boring and predictable game I have ever played, period. I had some hopes for this spin-off despite the rough scores, but those were too freaking nice for this god-awful game. I don't care how big those boobies are, they are just oversized balloons unable to keep this game afloat. And don't even get me started on Dante's Inferno. Filled to the brim with unlikable and uninteresting characters, and a God of War clone that was just boring, which should have been impossible considering we are in hell. And there are plenty more I can list, but out of all of them, the third birthday is still the one that pisses me off to this day more than any other game. I even skipped the Christmas tradition of reviewing the Parasite Eve games just so I could have a chance to destroy my copy sooner. Well, at least other people to do it since my hammer wasn't strong enough. You want to talk about destruction of a series? Look no further than this heaping mess. Also, while DmC is bad with its female characters, at least it doesn't make them strip down for no reason, or show them off in a shower cutscene, or be craped on. And I'm talking about the main characters, of course. And I remind you, you play as Eve in that game, a freaking 12-year-old.
And say what I want about DmC, at least its characters actually have personality.
But that's still no excuse for me to say that the reboot is good. Just because something worse came along in whatever year does not negate how bad a game is right now. If that were the case, every game would suddenly be fantastic because it wasn't E.T. And for those that still don't get why I can't like this game, let's make one more comparison to a series I have never brought up. Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts as a series is complicated as all hell, has convoluted plot elements, retcons that kinda ruin a moment or two in the series, and honestly burned me out by the time I got to Dream Drop Distance, which introduced a concept of time travel, and I just wanted it to be done. That's not even getting to the ending of Kingdom Hearts 3, which just made me smack my head against the door 100 times. Suffice it to say, this series is maddening to me. Why am I still involved? Because no matter how bad some plot elements are, or how convoluted the story can get, or how much time is spent on just waiting for the damn things to come out, or how disappointing the series has kept becoming with certain scenes.
Look, I wrote this part while drunk after seeing the Kingdom Hearts 3 ending. Just bear with me for a second.
And despite the fact that some characters I love get absolutely shit on, I'm still attached to the characters. I love seeing Sora regain the use of his Keyblade and reuniting with his friends. I loved Riku's determination to control the darkness inside of him, to make it his weapon, rather than the other way around. I felt sad with the deaths of Axel and Gion, and that's even with the certain infamous line. There are a wide array of emotions I can express at this series. At the end of the day, for me to love a game, it always comes down to, does this game make me care? And in the case of DmC, the answer is no. It hasn't made me care in all the time it's been out, and it will not make me care in a million years.
I'm the smartest moron, and thank you for enduring God knows how long this video has become. And hopefully we can face the future together. Like with the new review of Shadow Hearts from the New World. No, seriously, I put this video up right after I put up DmC. So take my advice and go watch it over here. And you move back a little bit. Yeah, I think that works. I hate that I have to do this for 20 seconds. Please make it stop. Okay, my girlfriend is watching this. Do not let me dance in real life. This is what you're gonna get.